specifically, if free agency ended today, are they on the right path?
They're on the right path, but it's still a lot of work that they now have to rely on for free agency or for the draft. Because, like, let's say they re-signed 3 of their own and then brought back 1 on a bigger deal. I'm happy with it because, again, I like Sutton. I think he fills a need. I think he's a boost in terms of what that secondary needs, which is intelligence and experience. He's a good player, but that can't be it. Like, it has to be more than that. You got to get either aggressive in the draft to me. Like, you got to do something to tip. Like, I've seen a lot of mocks where, again, we'll talk a little bit more about the draft, but I've seen mocks where Jalen Carter is falling and then he lands with the Lions. Like, something like that has to tip the favor for the Lions. So are they on the right path? Yes, but I still think there's a lot more work to do. And I think they got to get a little more comfortable with steering away from what's worked up to this point. Get aggressive. Get aggressive. Like, do something that's going to shake it up in an area of need. And, you know, I hope that that's the case by the end of this week.
I hope it is too. I just am like, I understand being consistent and I understand working a plan and I understand the whole Joel Embiidism of trusting the process. I'm here for it, right? And building through the draft. Like, the best way to build a team is through the draft. But I was also listening to local radio and they were talking about, like, if you signed Sutton, does that take you out of the cornerback market in the draft?
No.
Or do you add another high-level cornerback to that cornerback room?
You should, yeah.
And build that way. Because Sutton could only be here for 2, max 3 years.
Right.
So there's still a lot of pieces to the puzzle that need to get put together. Jamal Williams, still a free agent. DJ Chark, still a free agent, which I know we're going to talk about that. John Kaminsky, still a free agent. I don't know. I don't know how this affects the draft strategy. Like, I'll tell you, when we get to that segment, though, I did one mock where I tried trading up, and it became disastrous.
Oh, how high up did you try to go?
The highest I could get was to number 2 with the Texans. The Panthers would not take any deal that I took.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting, I told you I would only trade up and take Will Anderson. And I ended up getting Will Anderson at 2. And I still was able to retain 18 and got Bijan at 18. But everything after that was like a total disaster. And it was just not great.
Okay, let's peel into that a little bit. How much did you have to give up? Because I have a question that I want to get into.
Well, in order here, I've got it right here. Let me get to it.
Because I have. Go ahead.
Well, no, actually, I did have it right here.
Yeah, because I've seen philosophies and ideas of how aggressive the Lions need to be.
Yeah,
and I just have my own question about it, how this needs to be addressed. So I'm curious of what it took. This
was the lowest grade in a draft that I had in the mocks that I did, and it was a B+.
That's good.
Right.
You can take that.
To get up to number 2, I had to give up 6, 18, 81, and a 3rd round in 2024. And I got back number 2, a 3rd round this year, so I moved up in the 3rd round as well, and I got into the 4th round, and I picked up an extra number 6, a 6th round pick. So I traded 4 draft picks, but PFF graded it as a D+. But so I traded, and I got Will Anderson at 2, but since I didn't have 18 anymore, I went and traded back up into the 1st round, getting rid of that 3rd that I got from the Texans, the 2nd that I got from, or our 2nd round, the 4th round that I got from the Texans, a 4th and a 5th to get back up into the 1st round, and took Bijan at 19. And it was just a disaster after that. Like, I would never do that again.
I got killed for trying to get Bijan as well, like the 1st, and I didn't get a nice grade for that.
It was a D. At 19, I got a D Bijan at 19 was a D according to their grade. Everything else in that draft, though, A- for Will Anderson, A+, B, A+, A+. And it ended up as a B+ overall grade. So I think if you're going to get aggressive, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to cost. I mean, we know it's going to cost.
So okay, and I don't want to turn this into this conversation, but just stay with me.
We have to, yeah.
With so much pushback on Lamar Jackson costing the future of this team, right? It's going to cost too much money. You're going to have to give up your capital and all these picks. I'm listening to 97 Won the Ticket. I've seen conversations on social media. I've even put up a poll on my Twitter at I am Eric Vincent. I put up the idea, would you be okay with the Lions trading up for Jalen Carter or Will Anderson? You're going to have to get in the top 3, top 5, wherever. It's going to take a lot of aggressive moving. Maybe not. But for Will Anderson, more likely
for
than not.
Anderson, for sure.
So if you can get aggressive for that, how aggressive is this team allowed to be? Because for me, I've been balls to the wall this whole time. I think, like, you can't, like, I'm tired of people saying, oh, let's just build slow and good. Like, no, if you want to start winning, you have to start getting aggressive now. So I guess I'm trying to figure, like, how aggressive is too aggressive for now if people are scared of tanking the future for the team, but you also want to start winning right away. It's like, which one's it going to be? You see what I'm saying? Like, it just, I feel like people are kind of speaking out of both sides of their mouth in that discussion a little bit.
So here's my take on the whole thing.
Okay.
If you're building a house, you have to lay the foundation first. If you don't lay the foundation first, you're going to have a wobbly structure.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing that you want to do with this Lions franchise is build a house of cards where if one thing misses, the whole thing comes crumbling down.
Okay.
Which is why giving up so much capital for Lamar is a risky proposition.
It'll be risky for a rookie as well, too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. However, that's why we talked about this a few shows back. With me and draft capital, it's like upping your odds of hitting, because not every draft pick is going to hit.
Of course not.
And the more players that you can have on that 4-year, potentially 5-year if they're a first rounder with the 5th-year option rookie contract, the better chances you have of actually building something that is sustainable. So if last year was the foundation, when you lay the foundation, you don't then put the roof on top of it and cap it off. You got to do what? You got to build the walls. You got to put the support beam in. You got to get, the load-bearing walls. All those different types of things have to be in place before you can put the cap on it. Are the Lions at a place where they could put a cap on it right now? No, they're not. Which is partially my biggest gripe with the whole Jameson Williams trade up last year. That was kind of like a luxury pick for a team that didn't have the luxury to pick there. Where there were other building pieces, huh?
We disagree there, but it's cool.
I understand that we disagree there, but there's more foundational pieces than a speedy wide receiver that just takes the top off the defense. Yes, he's dynamic. Yes, with the ball in his hands, he can make plays. He's got to get the ball in his hands, first of all. So when we ask the question, how aggressive should they get? If you trade back up into the first round to take Bijan Robinson, that's too aggressive in my mind.
Because running back's not a foundational piece.
Right.
I'm with you on that one.
But how are you with me on that one and not with me on the Jameson Williams one? Because it's the same concept.
Because wide receiver was a need. They needed wide receiver help at that point.
Okay, I understand, but they need running back. They have 2 running backs. That's what you see. Like they literally have 2 running backs on the roster right now. Jamar Jefferson, he's a free agent. Justin Jackson, he's a free agent. Jamal Williams, he's a free agent. They have 2 running backs in that room right now.
Fine, but contrary to what? Okay, so let's go back to the first year Goff was here. The wide receiver group underperformed. Would you say the running back group underperformed last season? Because I would not. I think they were
the running back.
I will argue they were the most important piece of that team last year. So because of that, like I
only think that you say that because Jamal had such a good season pounding the ball in from the goal line.
Yeah, that was a need for this team.
Right. But that DeAndre Swift was a huge letdown last year.
Sure, but when Jamal plays as well as he did, it kind of, makes up for that a little bit.
But Jamal's also not on this team right now.
Sure.
And there's a potential that he may not be on this team. There's a very real possibility that he ends up in Carolina with Deuce Staley.
Absolutely. But also
So-
where me and you disagree is you believe that, like, you think receivers are less valuable than running backs. I don't agree with that. I think running backs are the least valuable position on an offense. And you can absolutely replace what Jamal did to an extent with a Bijan Robinson or anybody else that you find late. We'll talk about our drafts later with running back activity. And I just feel like you can plug that a little bit easier, where receiver, you kind of need guys, or you can be aggressive enough to go get a guy like J-Mo who is hurt but has upside to be a very explosive player on this team.
But at the same time, like when we talk about least valuable, like to me, they're like both. They're the two least valuable, both of them together.
I don't know about
Like,
that.
like whichever way you want to order them. To me, like, okay, if you're building, and I'm gonna keep this house analogy up because apparently
let's
I
talk
really
about
like
this
it.
house. Okay.
But like, if you're building this house, right, wide receivers and running backs are kind of like the decor that you hang on the wall. They're not the wall. They're the window dressing. And if you don't like this one, I mean, we found Amon-Ra in the 5th round, right?
Right.
So like, there's players like that can be had with less draft capital. When you have foundational pieces that can be had earlier in the draft, which is important. So, like last year, for instance, we know that this was a historically bad defense, and everybody knew that our need was defense, but yet we traded up to take a receiver that could not play until after Thanksgiving. That to me is window dressing. That's not that's not a foundational piece.
So would you consider Amon-Ra a foundational piece at this point?
Now,
Even as a 4th rounder? Yeah.
Well, yes, now, which makes drafting another wide receiver expendable in a lot of ways. Yes, you need more than one wide receiver. I'm with you. But there's pieces. And when you're talking about building a foundation, your line has to be good. Okay, check.
Which
you
it
got
is.
that, right?
It is.
You have to have a quarterback that at least protects the football. Okay, Jared
He
Goff's
does.
actually really good at that. So
Okay.
check there, right? There's your foundation on offense.
Right.
Now do you have a running back that can carry the load, or at least two running backs that can run through the holes at your offensive line? Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Now do you have wide receivers that can get open? That's kind of how I would build my offense. Because it all goes back to your philosophy, right? If you are a team, if you took like an air raid offense, yeah, you need receivers and you need good receivers. But if you are like a 60-40 run offense, then your running backs are more valuable than your wide receivers.
You also have an offense that's predicated on Jared Goff constantly trying to do play action. So with that,
Right, which makes your running backs more valuable than your wide receivers. Because if there's no threat back there with the play action, the action's null and void. But this team is best when it is using play action.
Sure, but I also
Because they're
believe,
built on a run concept and scheme.
But you also have to, like you talked about. I'll throw a scenario back at you. It's like a Broadway play. You have all your foundation pieces to start off. The offensive line does their job to set the tone of the play. The quarterback does his job to set the tone of the play. You have to cap it off with a great ending to that play. You can't have that if your receivers are not getting open, not catching the ball.
That's why it's all complimentary. I'm with you. We're kind of saying the same thing, but in just different ways, right? Like, it all takes a team effort, and it's all how you build. If you had Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, and Steph Diggs as your 1, 2, and 3, throw Amon-Ra in there as your slot wide receiver, but you had the Los Angeles Rams offensive line last year.
Oh yeah, then you're cooked.
It doesn't matter.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's not where the Lions are. So to me, with
I
that
know.
being said, and with the foundation defensive pieces flourishing better than we expected, I think that gives them the ability to be a little bit more aggressive. What do you mean, who?
Who on defense right now are you hanging your hat on other than like Aiden and Rodrigo and James Houston?
Kirby Joseph?
Okay, Joseph was good. Yep. That's another one.
I think
you have
Bugs
that's
and
4
McNeil are
players out of
important.
7 though.
Bugs and
Or
McNeil
4
are
out of
important.
11.
Bugs and McNeil are important.
They are
Jerry
important.
Jacob is a rotational guy that showed a lot of upside, I think. Like, those players matter. So, like, to me, like, again, I don't think the Lions are so far away in terms of, oh, we gotta have these picks stashed away and make sure that, like, no, you don't. You're only a few pieces away. If you establish an elite defensive line, you don't need an unbelievably flawless back seven and linebacker and secondary.
No, you're
if you have a solid D line,
yes. Solid front seven.
Right. So if you have that, you are allowed to be a little bit more aggressive.
I'm with you. I'm 100% with you.
Four. Let me say front four.
I would take it to the linebackers. You have to take it to the linebackers. Your defensive line and your linebackers have got to all be so impactful to an extent that it makes your secondary better. Right? I heard somebody say recently, like, you don't know any of the secondary names from the San Francisco 49ers. Why? Because their big uglies up front get the job done. And that's kind of what you want to build here. You know what I'm saying?
Big uglies, yes.
Yeah. So you want to establish that defensive line. That's why I think trading up for a Bijan Robinson is a mistake when you really don't have a very good defensive interior. When Alex Anzalone, going back to him, is your inside linebacker right now. There's pieces that need to be drafted.
Would you say that interior is ascending, though?
No. I would say the edge players are ascending.
Lost. Like, I feel like a lot of those pieces did well. Yes. And the D tackles, too. I think Bugs and McNeil did a good job last season.
Bugs plays defensive end. He's listed as a defensive end.
I thought he was a tackle.
No.
Okay, so regardless, it's a trenches position. Right?
Yes and no. If your defensive tackles are not effective enough, then it works itself out. Then your defensive ends are not going to be effective enough. Then your linebackers are not going to be effective enough. Alim McNeil, he did a great job. Josh Paschal can probably do a good job, but you've got to solidify that down lineman right over the center. That's got to be the dude.
I agree.
You saw the Eagles do it. They just got rid of, was it Musgrove? They let him go sign with the 49ers because they drafted Jalen Davis last year. They let TJ Edwards walk because they had Nakobe Dean waiting in the wing. Like, that's how you build. And they didn't waste draft capital on going up and getting a wide receiver. Now, arguably, they probably had flashbacks from drafting Jalen Reagor. But at the same time, there's a way that you have to build. And right now, the Lions, I don't think that they have the ability to get too aggressive in forfeiting draft capital. If it's to go up and get somebody like a Will Anderson, whose odds of hitting are much higher than many draft picks, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
He's probably the best, if not the second best, defensive prospect in this draft. We know that.
Sure.
But the other draft prospect has a lot of question marks around him and whether or not... I saw a report today that Schefter's saying that Jalen Carter could be there at 9 for the Bears to draft.
That's just crazy. I will be stunned.
Is it though?
Yes.
Is it though?
Yes.
It may not be.
Yes, it is.
Because if people think that he has character issues and he misled authorities and all this stuff that was said, and I'm not saying that's all alleged. It's not anything that's true. Right. He's refuted that stuff, and I hope that he comes out clean because I hate seeing kids, one mistake costing them a lot in the future.
Right.
But I think that's a possibility. Now, I personally don't think he would ever make it past the Lions at 6.
Me neither.
I don't, but if he doesn't fit the Campbell and Holmes mold, and if he doesn't have that mentality, right? Wasn't it Dan Campbell that said they interviewed 30 players and 4 of them had the it factor?
The it factor, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If he's not one of those 4, they're not taking him at 6.
Yeah, I don't think that's a question. I get it, but I don't think... to me, I feel like the Lions are like one of those teams that, like, you see a lot of groupthink in terms of how owners, we're seeing it with Lamar Jackson currently. Like, you can't tell me otherwise. I believe owners are colluding to not sign him because they don't want to pay guaranteed money. Like, that's what I believe. I don't think the Lions would fall in that kind of conversation with a guy like Jalen Carter, where historically they've taken chances on guys before. And I don't think they're scared of, like, again, we don't know the full details of what's happened. All we know is what we know. And I don't think it's enough to push him back that far to where he would be available at a pick 9. I just couldn't see that. I could not see that.
I hope it doesn't happen, because the last thing I want to see is him in Chicago with Tremaine Edmonds behind him, because that that's the worst case scenario, actually.
Which is why I was so surprised about the trade down anyway, because if you wanted to trade down, you still could have.
Did you see what they got?
They got a lot, but if you still prioritized like having your trenches set, he could have been a guy. But again,
I think they had a plan. I mean, clearly they had $95 million in cap space. They had a plan, and with all that draft capital, who's to say they can't use that to trade up to 5?
They still might. It's very,
you know what I mean?
Like,
that's very much within the realm of possibility. So I don't know. The